You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Successful Screenwriter Podcast, where we discuss anything and everything screenwriting. Here we interview successful screenwriters and filmmakers to find out just what it takes to make it in the industry. All right, welcome to the podcast. We have on an amazing guest today, the screenwriter of the cult classic film, The Crow, David J. Schow. David, thanks for being on with us.
Thanks for doing this. Let's see where it takes us.
Exactly. Let's go on an adventure. So before we really kind of roll into discussing The Crow and adapting it from the comic book and everything, I want to get your origin story, just kind of where you came from, how you happened into screenwriting, how that led into your big moment, your big break, and then how that got you The Crow.
Well, one thing that happens when you do interviews like this is people say, do you have advice for people who want to work in the motion picture industry or be in television or write screenplays or something like that?
Okay.
And I don't necessarily have a whole lot of advice for people, but I do have a story. And if you want to follow the story, here it is.
All right.
Once upon a time, there was me writing prose, getting published in these things that used to be called magazines that people used to like buy and read, you know, way back in the before times.
I've heard of them.
Yeah. They were these paper things and they tended to take up a lot of space when you let them pile up. And I had done that for the better part of the 80s.
Okay.
And I had amassed a pretty good retinue of published work. Now what happened was that there was the one in a million thing, which is somebody at a studio was a fan of my short stories.
Oh.
Called me up on the phone and said, hey, would you be interested in coming to talk to us about doing movies?
Wow.
And that was Mike DeLuca when he was at New Line. And when he was just really barely more than a developmental reader at New Line. And I went to New Line and I met Mike. And he said, would you be interested in writing our next Freddy movie?
Really?
Which was Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child.
Okay.
And I said, sure, why not? You know, having never done this sort of thing before.
Yeah, of course. You always say yes. Always say yes.
Yeah, no, I wrote a treatment for him. Never, you know, it's like if a door opens up, go in and see what's in the room before you say no. And I wrote up a treatment for him called Freddy Rules.
All right.
And I took it back to him, and everybody at New Line said, this is terrific. We want you to write our next Freddy movie. Go across the hall, give them your social security number. Oh, and one more thing. We need to see a screenplay that you've written. And I was the only in Los Angeles with no script in his back pocket. So I did not get the job.
Oh, no.
So we go back to, with our heads hanging down, you know, we go back to Mike's office. What are we going to do now? And they were trying to spin Freddy off into a TV show at the time called Freddy's Nightmares.
I think they did actually do that. I think
they were in fact doing that at the time. And
yeah.
Mike said, let's go over to the production office of Freddy's Nightmares, which was, if you're in LA, Freddy's Nightmares was way the out in Sun Valley. I can say, can I?
I'll bleed it out. Don't worry about it.
Every once in a while. Yeah.
I'll bleep it out. It's okay.
From New Line, the studio where they were shooting Freddy's Nightmares was way the hell out in Sun Valley.
Okay.
And it was right next to this horrible little bar called The Web, where DeLuca and I shot a lot of pool under dicey circumstances. And it was like just this whole studio was tiny, you know.
Yeah.
And they were doing these shows as cheap as possible. And I began hanging around the office of the producer, Jeff Froehlich, trying to figure out how to sell him an episode of Freddy's Nightmares so I could use that as a thing to show New Line to prove I could write a script.
Right.
You following this so far?
Oh, no. Yeah, it's a brilliant idea.
Now, if you've ever pitched a script to a production guy on a TV series like that. And back in the day or now, it really hasn't changed that much. You try to figure out what are their wants, what are their needs, what will they like?
Yep.
And you write these detailed things. And they go, well, can you beat it out for us? And beat it out has a variety of definitions, all of which apply in this circumstance. And you do these complicated documents, and then and they go, nah, we don't like that. No, we don't like that. And it always boils down to you sitting on the couch in the producer's office. They have these couches that you go in and sit on so that you're automatically lower than they are in the room. And frequently their desk is in front of a window.
Interesting.
So that you're lower than they are, looking up at them, and they're just a silhouette, in daylight. It's very imposing and it's very intentional. And I said, Jeff, I'm tired of trying to figure that. What if there was like this goth chick and she was in high school and her idea of a dream date is Freddie?
Interesting.
Didn't beat it, didn't write it out. He did the thing that happens every so often. He points at me and he goes, go do it. And I did it. It was a teleplay called Safe Sex for the first season.
Yeah.
And I turned it in, and within 24 hours, I was hired to write New Line's next horror movie, which was Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3.
Wow.
Now,
is that the one with McConaughey?
No.
Okay.
That was after us.
Okay. All right.
This was the one where they wanted to try to twist the chainsaw stuff into a franchise like Freddy.
Okay. All right.
There are very clear mirrors of the way things that were done in Freddy movies, such as the very beginning of the movie where Leatherface is sewing together his mask out of other people's faces, right, just like the beginning of Nightmare on Elm Street where Freddy is making the glove.
Oh, I gotcha.
In his workshop.
So they're using it as a template. Let me ask you this. Did they shoot that episode of Nightmare on Elm Street, the TV show?
Yes, they did. Not only did the first teleplay I wrote get bought and produced, but the first movie I wrote got bought and produced, one after the other. And I'll never forget the day when both of them happened. It was in January. It was on the 13th of January. It wasn't a Friday the 13th. That would have been perfect. But I subsequently wrote the most censored episode of Freddy's Nightmares, censored for sex.
Okay.
They cut 8 minutes out of the show.
Wow.
Now, if you've ever watched film, and
you went for it.
This was still on film. It was shot in 16 mil.
Okay.
If you've ever watched 8 minutes of film go through a moviola, you know it's an eternity.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were in the position of, what are we going to put in place of this stuff that we cut out?
Yeah.
We not only wrote the most censored episode of Freddy's Nightmares, we wrote the most censored chainsaw movie ever done at that point because we had to go back to the MPAA 11 times.
Oh my gosh.
We missed our release date. They had done all the publicity in November 89, and the movie didn't come out until early 1990. And when it did come out, there was no advertising because all the money had been blown 4 months earlier.
Oh no! Was it a sleeper hit at least?
No.
Oh man!
Of the top 10 movies that came out that week, it was number 11. So,
well, there's no advertising budget. Nobody knew it was there.
So we're, and the funny thing and the ironic thing is that it gained ground as a kind of a cult movie. And about 4 years ago, back before Cinefamily in LA dissolved into scandal, they used to have these midnight showings at the old silent movie theater and stuff. And it says, well, we want to do Leatherface, and we're going to have some of the actors come down, like Billy Butler and Ken Foray, will come down. And we had a midnight showing of Leatherface, and it was a full house. And I realized at that point something that I said to the audience when I was talking to them. I said, we made the worst Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie ever made until the next one came out. And that was the one with McConaughey.
That's a great way to look at it.
And thank heavens for Matthew McConaughey, because next to his movie, we just look better and better and better.
That's great.
So in the story of what do you tell an aspiring screenwriter and how you get started, if you want to do it the way that I did it, which was spend a decade writing fiction and hope somebody at a studio notices you and calls you on the phone, because I didn't have any representation, any way in, nor did I have any aspiration to do that. What I thought was going to happen was if I wrote enough books, somebody would buy rights and one of them might get made into a movie that way. And that's not how it happened. That's not how it happened at all. But I found one guy in Hollywood that was a fan of the stories.
Your path, though, as deliberate or even potentially, as you may say, accidental as it was, I actually think it was quite brilliant, because I actually know a writer who he tells people, write as many blogs as you can because you never know. He wrote a post on a blog about screenwriting and filmmaking that went viral. A producer found it, picked it up, loved it, loved what he had to say, hired him to write a script. That script now had a theatrical release and is on streaming and Netflix. And so I'd say that is the modern day version of exactly what you were doing. And it was about putting yourself out there. And I think that is brilliant.
No writing is wasted.
Yeah.
If you ever write it down. And if you write a screenplay and nobody likes it, it's grist for the mill. Stuff that you love in that screenplay is going to get recycled, if only spiritually, through other screenplays.
Oh, absolutely. I cannibalize my old stuff if I have to. I think because if you don't do a movie of it, you may do a comic book of it. Yeah. No, I think that's a great advice.
Remember the period of time where we were dealing with like development people who were so it's funny they call them development people. Because they're developmentally arrested, but development people who were so developmentally arrested, there was a period of time where nobody was ashamed to say, well, we really can't read your script. Can you do it as a comic book first? Because everybody was buying comics in Hollywood, right?
Right.
So it's can you do it as a comic first? Well, that kind of came true, in the long run. And with the success of comic book movies, everybody became substantially more interested. Comic books were never a low rent neighborhood in the movie industry.
Well, I want to talk about this because you wrote The Crow, right?
Yeah.
And that was way in early. I mean, I think The Crow, Batman, Blade, I think your movies and those movies helped launch the comic book industry in Hollywood.
The only movie that they ever compared The Crow to was Batman.
I think tonally it's close. I mean, I've read your script and I'm reading it, and it reads similar to the tone of Batman, but it goes in a way different direction.
I wrote that script having absolutely no familiarity with Batman.
It's just good writing is what it is. It paints that kind of gothic nature that you expect from like a type of a metropolis like that. So
it really is an otherworld city, because being from Michigan, that this has nothing to do with what Detroit looks like.
No, but I mean, you in The Crow, you've got Devil's Night, which was a big problem here. I mean, I remember
a Detroit thing. Yes.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, we were very scared of Devil's Night. It was a real thing. It finally got under control, but at one point it was scared into us. Let's put it that way. Devil's Night was a big problem.
Terry Hayes, who did some writing on The Crow, ancillary writing on The Crow, wrote a whole script about Devil's Night that was never produced. And it may very well have been that that was one of the things that when Terry was going to work on The Crow, that crossed our desk, and that may very well have been where the idea to include Devil's Night was from.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. I mean, let's talk about how you got the gig for The Crow, and specifically, what were the adaptations that you had to make for The Crow from the graphic novel or comic book series itself?
Well, that's a complicated path, and it's like the way that people ask, how did you get the gig to do that movie? And the short answer to that one is after Leatherface, and I wrote a couple of Critters sequels for New Line. And I was doing 3 and 4. They're both mine.
That's awesome.
We shot them back to back in a supermarket on Pico Boulevard in Hollywood. There were still props from Suburban Commando, the Hulk Hogan movie, in the background.
Wow.
But we had, in Leatherface, we got Viggo Mortensen before he was Viggo.
Oh, really?
And Critters 3 was Leonardo DiCaprio's first feature film. He was like 12, or something like that.
That's fantastic.
We had Angela Bassett in Critters 4. It was.
Look at the talent that they have watched,
We're the
man.
star makers.
Yeah.
We had Angela Bassett and Brad Dourif, believe it or not.
Wow.
So I got called to do, as Penelope Spheris wanted to do a movie called Deadly Metal.
Okay.
Which was about a heavy metal band that eats its groupies, basically.
That's an interesting concept. All right.
That led to a really interesting meeting that didn't evolve into anything, although Penelope was wonderful. And the producer who called that meeting wound up changing positions, and he was working for Ed Pressman at the time. And when Alex decided they wanted another writer on The Crow, Cotty Chubb, who was working at Ed Pressman, remembered me from the Deadly Metal meeting, and he called me and he goes, "Do you think you'd be interested in this?" And I had no familiarity with the comic book.
Yeah.
I had never seen it before. I didn't know O'Barr. I surely didn't know him as well as I know him now.
Right.
And we went in, and there commenced probably about a year and a half of working on that screenplay. Draft after draft after draft in LA, and then finally in Wilmington, North Carolina, 3 months before production started. We're all holed up there writing a draft a day, basically.
Wow, really trying to figure this script out.
Well, because the way that it wound up was that Alex and I were sharing a house. Proyas and I were sharing a house in Wilmington. He was upstairs and I was downstairs, and in the evenings during pre-production, we would literally sit on opposite sides of a room with our backs to each other, typing away on PowerBook 140s.
Wow.
At the time. And then he'd hand me what he had, and then I'd rewrite it, and I'd hand it back, and he'd rewrite it. And we were doing that all through production. In fact, when we were shooting, it was virtually all night shoots. And so about 2:00 in the morning was lunch. And at lunch, I got 10 minutes with Alex, like in his trailer, to find out what I was going to spend the next 24 hours doing. And so did Peter Pound, our storyboard guy. He and I would go in together, and we'd sit there with Alex at lunch, and we'd find out what our next day was going to be full
this
of.
This is during production?
Yes.
So while they're shooting?
Yes.
Oh, I see. So Alex didn't have a completed script before he went into shooting.
Well, we didn't have a completed comic either, Jeff.
I did not know that.
The comic wasn't finished. When we started writing the script, and even up through production, James O'Barr had only finished 3 issues of the comic. We had a set of incomplete pencils.
Oh my gosh,
the last
I had no idea.
2 parts, and we literally kind of had to dope out for ourselves how it was going to end, because he comes back from the dead, and he shoots a lot of heroin. He plays the guitar, kills some guys, shoots some more heroin, plays the guitar, kills some more guys, and he kills some guys, and then he shoots some heroin.
That's your beat. That's your beat sheet.
Yeah, basically. And how long has it been since he killed some guys? Okay, let's go back. So your primary things are, reduce the number of bad guys, because in the comic, 7 people come out of that car? I forget.
Okay, all right.
It's a lot of people come out of the car, and it says we gotta reduce the number of bad guys and focus on how we're going to eliminate them. And in the course of that, try to do something that's something other than Death Wish of the Living Dead.
Right.
And that's where Brandon comes in, because Brandon contributed to the script.
Really?
This podcast is brought to you by thesuccessfulscreenwriter.com, where you can find instructional books, videos, courses, and screenplays of Hollywood's biggest hits to download. As an added bonus, visit www.thesuccessfulscreenwriter.com to download The Guide for Every Screenwriter for free. Yes, free. Available exclusively at thesuccessfulscreenwriter.com. Now, back to our show.
Alex contributed to the script. Brandon said, we originally had an Asian bad guy, and Brandon said, no way.
Yeah, that
And
makes sense.
And we said, you're right. You're right. Because we were just kind of following the magnetism of what, like mystic weirdness was be.
Right.
He's absolutely right.
The Bai Ling character.
Yeah. And it's like, there's an echo of that in Bai Ling.
Yeah.
But now we've recast her, so it's actually kind of funny. It's like, well, when Wincott says, "Oh, she's my sister,"
yeah,
you're like, what the hell's
going
going
what?
on?
Yeah, it works though. And one thing, speaking of Brandon, I thought, because I rewatched it recently. I mean, I loved that film as a kid. I can admit that I definitely dressed up as the Crow for Halloween. Not gonna lie.
So did my nephew.
Yeah. So watching again recently, it holds up. It holds up, David. That is a solid story. The script is good. The effects hold up, and it's not dated. But Brandon brought levity to the role, which I didn't realize as a kid. But there's a couple of scenes where the cops is like, freeze, don't move, and he shuffles away, kind of like a vaudevillian.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's all him.
Yeah, brilliant.
That's all him in the moment, because the script doesn't say bounce away like a puppet. It's like, oh, that's Brandon.
Yeah. He brought some extra cool depth to the role. So I did not realize that you didn't have a completed story to work off during the shooting. That's absolutely impressive that you're able to weave everything together.
The charter with a lot of adaptations, and not just comic books, but novels and everything, is usually you would like to capture the spirit of the original material, not necessarily transpose it beat for beat.
Right.
I mean, we had people that were pissed off at the movie because we didn't replicate one panel from the comic. I mean, literally. Well, my favorite panel, and you didn't do it, so your whole movie sucks.
Yeah, well, there's movies that do that, and the movie's terrible.
Yeah.
So, I mean, whatever. You can't please everybody.
There's a fine line when it comes to fan service.
Yeah.
And it's like, you got to remember, it's like, if we don't make anything any good, it's not going to last, and nobody's going to want to watch it.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, this holds up. Now,
I'm glad to hear you say that.
It does, man. So there's this. I mean, when I was younger, everybody talked about the Skull Cowboy, and nobody knew what the Skull Cowboy was. Now on the internet, you could find the deleted scene and all of that stuff. So I personally think that the way the script is now, and the way the mythology is set up, where it's not overly explained. His soul comes back through the Crow. He avenges the deaths, and then his magic comes from the Crow and all that stuff. I think that all works. The whole Skull Cowboy thing and coming on and trying to kind of explain everything to him, it was in the script. I read the script. I want to know what you think. Do you wish the Skull Cowboy was there? Are you glad the way it worked out, having it cut?
Not necessarily, because I'm sad that Michael Berryman didn't get more of a part in the movie.
Okay,
because it's like, you cast Michael Berryman as the Skull Cowboy, and then you cover his entire head up with makeup. It's like, what is the point?
And his voice would have been altered too, right?
Yeah,
so then,
exactly.
So it's
because he had so much gear on his head that when I did the lines, it talked like this. I know, because I rehearsed him, and overall, though, the only reason that's there is it's an image from the comic.
Okay.
And we thought, do we want to get into the idea that if he deviates from redressing the wrongs that were done to him and his loved ones,
right,
setting the wrong things right, we wanted a guy who had gone down the same path like a century earlier.
Right.
Except he had made the wrong choice, and now he's doomed to be this spectral thing. And it also explained where the Crow came from.
Right.
Bird.
Yeah.
The bird was a familiar of the Skull Cowboy. But you get to the movie and you don't need any of that. And we had shot half of it, and we realized we didn't need it.
Yeah.
So Alex said, I think we're not going to do it. I think it's out.
I think
and it's a good idea. I think
it works.
It's perfectly valid.
there's so many films where there is a mystery or there's this monster, this alien, and they overly explain it, and then you kind of lose the audience. I think there is power in the mysticism. I think
Yeah.
there is power in just letting the audience kind of accept it and figure out for themselves what it is. Because I think that even adds a little bit of more mystery around that character, and I think it's brilliant. So I think it works, but I could totally understand like why you would want that cowboy in there. So
No, you've got to, it's like writing a script in the first place. You've got to write it bad in order to write it good. Okay? And it's like, that's a path that we experimented with that made it all the way to us shooting footage.
right.
There were tons of other things in the script that never even made it that far. It's out, it's
Right.
changed, but that's how the evolution of a script, or at least a good script, I hope,
Yeah.
comes about. And it's like, it's trial and error, because you know what a tightrope walk it is just to be making a movie in the first place.
Oh my God. Especially if you're working on, I don't want to say this wrongly, but like a godlike character that can't die. When I look at one of the Wolverine films where Wolverine was like super powered and he couldn't die. And so it was like the worst Wolverine movie because it wasn't working. The audience wasn't buying it. And then when they depowered him in like Logan and the other films, now people were worried about him because he could die. And so as I'm watching, go ahead.
There's no risk. There's no risk.
Yeah,
It's
and
like
the stakes are low.
Superman's not interesting unless you have kryptonite,
Yeah.
because he just wins all the time.
Exactly. Yeah. And so what I thought was great with the Crow is because you have this character, you have, you have Eric and he can't die. And so you're going, okay, what's going to happen? So you've got the little girl, she's the stakes, right? But then you bring in the fact that if you hurt the Crow, then that's his power source. And I thought, okay, that is great. So obviously the comic books weren't done yet. So was this a you invention? Did this come out of the blue, or did you guys kind of just...
I would say, I think, now I'm starting to sound like Alex in an interview now. I think we invented this for the movie.
Okay.
The minute I say that, someone will go back to the comic and say, no, here's the thing where if you hurt the bird, you hurt him. Yeah. I'm not 100% certain on that one, but you can tell that we were testing it out in the movie because it is not explained as clearly as it could be.
Yeah.
It sort of comes and goes. And I think that's the mark of us coming up with an irresolute idea, but there was enough strength to it to persist into the movie. Also, the fact that if he deviates from his agenda, the powers go away like that.
Right.
And it's like, that's the other thing that we were really interested in, because and he discovers, because first of all, he didn't ask to come back.
No.
And that's one part that really intrigued me. It's like he's back sort of against his will, but now that he's here, which is another reason I think that it's more poignant if it's personalized to just that movie and to just Brandon. I don't think you do sequels. I don't think you do remakes, as well-intentioned as they may have been. I just don't. I don't think it's what Alex says. It's like, just don't mess with this one. Do not reboot this, and the sequels never hit what you guys are trying to go for, and the magic that he brought to the role. Isn't that proof that going back to that well is not going to work? How much proof do they need? Apparently they never have enough, because they keep talking about redoing it again. Do they really? Oh yeah, there's been tons of scripts written. It's unnecessary. It really does hold up. I'll tell you. So you got me thinking about it. One of the most powerful scenes. How dare you, sir? One of the most powerful scenes for me in that movie was when the Eric busts through the window and grabs the mother, who's a morphine addict. Right. And that's the mother of Sarah, the little girl. Right. And he holds her up to a mirror and he says something to her about poison, and then the morphine drains from her veins. Right. Morphine is bad for you. Oh my gosh. That was such a powerful scene that it stuck with me as a kid, because I'd never seen anything like that before. It was exceptionally powerful. So were you guys intending on making a commentary on drugs or anything like that? Because obviously back when this came out, heroin was a big problem. Yeah, well, morphine was a big problem. and again, it derives from the comic because it's a similar.
So that's from the comic.
Yeah, it's the sentiment is from the comic because O'Barr came up with a line that I always had a problem with because it's not grammatical, and it's like mother is the name for God on the lips and heart, of all children. Basically.
Yeah, I didn't understand that either.
It's like he can say whatever he wants. It's his character. It's just the grammar is screwed up.
Yeah.
For me, and so I have a problem. But that's that statement. Mother is the name for God.
Yeah.
That statement is the heart of that scene.
Okay.
And everything else was just the way we wrote it and blocking and everything. And it's like,
right.
No, it's like it upset people when we shot it.
Really?
Yeah.
It's powerful and visually showing that, and then the actor taking that and really working with it and seeing that way on her face as she's running out is beautiful. It's a powerful scene. And I mean, there's just like a lot of that stuff. You don't expect that from a superhero film, right? You're not going to see that in Batman.
Yeah.
And so
you're gonna expect a moment of levity to defang whatever dramatic thing that you've just seen. It's a poke in the ribs,
right?
When you're watching it.
Yeah, no, you weigh on it. You like it's heavy. It sits there for a minute. It's okay. It works.
We don't have wacky villains in weird costumes. We have absolute scumbags. It's like, and they are in weird costumes in their own way.
Oh yeah.
And we do have comic relief because we have Skank.
Yeah,
so
you do.
It all sort of fell to him,
but it's not tongue in cheek. And I think Brandon brought that as well. So since
if you play it straight, it'll take care of itself. Trust me.
Yeah. Don't go overly ham and don't get pretentious. I think is definitely something you want to be careful of.
Don't Shatner it up. Yeah.
Could you imagine? So talking about the elephant in the room, a tragic loss with Brandon and, having to deal with that. And since you were actively working on the script at the time, how much work needed to be done? I mean, I'm assuming you wanted to complete this project to honor him.
Well, that was an issue to begin with too, because Alex just wanted to bury the whole movie.
Really?
And if it had not been for a couple of the actors going and making an appeal to Alex directly, which boils down to, listen, we can either bury Brandon and the movie, or we can bury Brandon and have the movie stand as a legacy to him.
Yeah, and it does.
Alex changed his mind. It took 6 weeks. I lived through the same 6 weeks that everybody else did. I was there when we shut the production down.
Wow.
And everybody had to get on planes and go home.
Yeah.
And we're sitting around now picture this. We're sitting around for 6 weeks. We're sitting around for a month and a half waiting for the phone to ring. And
it had to be hard. I mean, it had to be. It's so tragic.
Going home was hard. Staying there was hard. Going back was ultra hard.
Yeah.
But 3/4 of the crew came back. Some of them worked for reduced fees. Some of them worked for no money.
Okay.
There was one thing that happened incidentally as a result of this tragedy, which is absolutely the worst thing that can happen to you on a movie set.
Okay.
I dare you to come up with something worse. It's worse if it has a bigger body count, I guess.
Yeah, I'm at a loss.
Yeah, it's like, imagine, put yourself in the position you're being there and watching somebody die right in front of you and going, well, okay, next scene,
Oh my goodness.
And to have Brandon die, and we were 4 days away from finishing production.
Oh.
Unfortunately, those 4 days were all character scenes with his wife.
Okay.
In the movie, and we had to find ways to cover that. I'll give you a perfect example. And we had to spend a lot of time thinking about it and knocking our heads against the wall a long time. There's a scene where Sarah, and she's called Sarah incidentally because the little girl in the comic is named Ellie. Okay. But the Sophia Sheena's character is named Shelley. And we thought Shelley and Ellie, that's just too cute. Yeah, we have to change it. So that's why she's named Sarah.
Okay.
There's a scene where Sarah goes back to the apartment a year afterwards, is when she finds the cat.
Okay.
Gabriel, the cat. And he's not there. He was there once and now he's gone. And she's talking to the empty room. And he shows up at the end of that scene, because he is a spectral, supernatural presence.
Right.
Well, that scene originally had Brandon in it.
Okay.
He was there talking to her when she goes back to the apartment. And then it was an example of a scene where we said, somehow it fits and somehow it's more powerful if he's not there. And she's talking to the empty room. How many people have ever done that with a loved one who's died?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And then to have him appear at the end, that's when Jeff Cadiente was standing in for him. And we just had to figure out ways to fake it, man.
Right.
It's so funny to listen to fans of the film talk about, they're positive that they know which scenes Brandon's in and not. Being a person myself who was standing there for most of the scenes, that is, in every shot in this movie, I can probably tell you where I'm standing relative to the camera in each scene. It's like, I was there. Oh yeah. Oh, that's not Brandon. That's the stuff. Nope. That's Brandon. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because not every shot of Brandon is a mug shot where he turns his face to the camera so you know it's him.
Exactly.
A perfect example of that is when he does the high dive through the billboard.
Right.
Well, Brandon's not going to jump off a building. That's Jeff Cadiente doing the dive, but the impact is Brandon.
Oh, okay.
So he gets up out of the thing. He jumps into the car with Ernie Hudson.
With the crazy
Brandon.
laugh. Yeah. Okay.
That's Brandon.
Okay. Very good.
And when we were shooting this movie, we're also going to the movies in North Carolina. We're going to see this movie that just came out while we're shooting The Crow. This movie is called Jurassic Park.
Oh,
and
yeah.
We're sitting in the theater and we're going, oh my God, everything is about to change horribly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That changed everything.
And like you were talking about other aspects of this that differentiated, I think one of the pure things about The Crow as a movie is that we were right on the edge of CGI.
Yeah.
A little bit later, and the movie would have been overrun with CGI.
Yeah, you have a lot of practical effects.
We only supered Brandon's face into 3 scenes.
I think you're one of the first films to do it too.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. Well, it was you guys, and it was Jurassic Park were the first.
Yeah. You had to have been there
when
we were all watching Jurassic Park, and we're just like in the theater, and we're like looking at each other like this. It's like, uh-oh.
I remember watching Avatar going, dinosaurs are real. I mean, I've said that, but then I only experienced that twice. I experienced that on Jurassic Park, and then experienced it when Avatar came out. And I sat down Avatar and went, okay, all right, things are changing again. This thing is a whole new level.
But when we started shooting the movie, it was I was shooting video on the set the whole time.
Okay.
And it was freezing in Wilmington. We were there. It was the temperature was so, our wet downs on the phone pole wires froze.
It looked cold. You could see breath from the actors. Yeah.
Getting his boots out of the dumpster in the rain. It was like 20 degrees maybe.
Oh my gosh.
And we would run up and like throw these heated blankets on him and throw him in the back of this. And he's got, no, let's do it again. Let's do it. He's barefoot. He doesn't have a shirt on. And he's got fake rain coming down to. Plus, it's freezing out. So everybody who's shooting him has got parkas and shit on,
Yeah.
And then we stopped production. And then when we went back, it was a typical North Carolina humid spring. And it was just like, oh God, it was so opposite what we had left. So it was like the east and west of The Crow.
Yeah, that's crazy. One thing you did in The Crow, you used a lot of rain, and you used his character sings a song about rain. He comments on rain. The little girl comments on rain. So I mean, water traditionally is used visually as emotional changes within a character. You can use water as sadness, but you can use it as change. And I was wondering, I mean, was this a decision that you made purposely?
Well, we wanted to shoot at night, and I think most of the wet downs and the rain come from a desire to make it a very kind of what we call a gothic noir
kind
of look.
Yeah.
If it has reflections in character balances, that's a good thing. But I can't think of a moment where we sat down and intentionally said what you just said.
Okay.
It was like, if you decide to do things a certain way, there are ingredients that go with it, and they improve what you're after, visually and storytelling wise. And I think it just made it made a lot of sense, and it got us with one of our lines where, where we say it can't rain all the time.
Can't rain all the time. Exactly.
You have no idea. People have had this tattooed on their bodies. I've got a file full of photographs of people's tattoos of this,
wow,
of their crow tattoos. O'Barr has just got tons of the flaming outline, the bird of Brandon's face, all these icons from the movies. And when you go to where Brandon is buried next to his dad in Seattle, the gravesite, and the two tombstones are side by side, and there's a bench where you can sit and watch it, and you go, and there's always offerings at the grave.
Aww.
The little bottles of whiskey, and there's flowers, and there's cards, and there's poem, and you pick up some of the cards and you read them, and in the card is a line of dialogue that you wrote.
Wow.
That is a punch in the heart.
It's got to be overwhelming. And this is something that you wrote. It's not from the comic.
Well, I'm speaking of it's like there are quotes from the comic, quotes from the movie, and quotes that I wrote. And it can't rain all the time is one of mine.
That's awesome.
And
it's a great line.
But it overall, forget me. Overall, it just demonstrates that this thing has a permanence that a lot of movies don't have, I think.
I agree with you. It's a cult classic, and I almost think that undersells it because it has influenced so many other films. It has influenced so many other styles. I think calling it a gothic noir is absolutely perfect. It is its own thing in so much that other projects have tried to replicate it. And I mean,
lots of other projects have tried to replicate it in multiple languages.
Yeah, exactly. Countries. So it really does hold up. And I was watching it again, and I was really appreciating it, and I'm so glad that I did, because watching it when I was younger, I couldn't even have the appreciation of looking and going, there's rain everywhere, and he's got this line of this dialogue, and it's all tied in together so beautifully. And I know that it was either intuitive, it was skill, it was mastery, whatever you want to call it, but it really does work within the story.
Now, I'm not making a claim that we were strategically brilliant all the time.
I understand.
Because the kind of the seat of your pants nature of making movies cancels that out. It's like, what I am saying is that there are story elements, there are characters, actors, and things that come along in movies that come along at the right time.
Yep.
And I think this was one of those things.
But being able to capitalize that, take advantage of it, even as you have done in your own career, I'll say this, and then you could get uncomfortable by it. It's brilliant. And that's what it is. I certainly after The Crow, I got to tell you, it's like I had meetings on every comic book movie imaginable after The Crow. I believe it. You're writing books, you're writing comics, you're writing novels. What are you working on right now? Storm King stuff.
I'm writing a little bit of everything. I feel guilty almost because people have been impacted by COVID-19 in 2020. And they said, well, how do you feel about lockdown? How do you feel about it's like, don't call it the pandemic, call it what it is. It's the plague,
It is.
And they say, well, how do you feel about that? And I says, well, my term for this period may upset a few people because I like to call it writer's paradise.
If you have something in development and it gets put on pause, that sucks. And I mean, I'm experiencing that. But as far as being productive, I haven't had a day off.
I have. I'm involved in this really intensive, deep project of bringing my backlist. You see, I've written about 30 books.
Wow.
In my life, and I want to bring my back. And I started last May, bringing my backlist into print in uniform editions, so the spines all match on the shelf, right?
Oh, that's cool.
That we're doing with my pal John Scolari, who runs Cimarron Street Books. because I needed a middleman to do this. I mean, if you're going to use Amazon as your publisher, you need to make sure that your product looks like an actual book and not something that somebody whacked together in their garage. And we have been reissuing my backlist in what I like to call remixed editions. That is, they have more stuff,
Cool,
more visuals. It's a version that never existed of this book before. We would like to get a perfect version of each one. And we put out a book a month since last June. You can look at them on the Cimarron Street website as they come out.
We will do that.
They pop up on Amazon, but you can also order them direct from Cimarron Street. And Cimarron Street is an I Am Legend reference, by the way. Thanks to John being obsessed with that movie. We've been concentrating on the short story collections because those are the most fragile books there are. Now, it seems like it shouldn't be that way, because if you want to tell scary stories on television or in print or in movies, the best way to tell scary stories is to keep them short.
Okay.
And I would rather watch a movie made out of a short story than a movie made out of a novel where you have to start chopping its arms and legs.
I think
off.
it's I think it's a great point. I mean, you're talking about any Stephen King adapted movie right now.
You look at one of Steve's books and you go, okay, we got to figure out what we're going to cut first. Whereas if you take the story, you may not love Graveyard Shift, as a movie, but it's like, the people sat down, just like anybody sits down to make a movie. They sat down and said, okay, how can we make 90 minutes out of this?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a one shot, because horror stories are all about what Edgar Allan Poe used to talk about as the effect. And everything builds toward the effect. It's true then, it's true now. And that's why I think anthology horror shows are still the best versions of that.
Okay, like American Horror.
Yeah, we're now seeing, American Horror Story has it both ways, which I really like. It's like, we're anthological in that we keep using the same cast for different stories, which I think personally is brilliant.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
And people have their quibbles with it, but I'm a huge fan of that show.
Yeah.
What's the other show I'm a huge fan of? What else? Black Mirror.
Yep. Okay.
Anthology show, right?
Yeah.
The closest thing that we could possibly hope for to a modern version of the Twilight Zone.
I've heard it called that, but I used to love The Outer Limits as a kid.
Well, I'm the world expert on The Outer Limits, so stop there.
Okay. That's a whole different show. I'll bring it back up.
I've only done 2 books on the whole show. Yeah, it's like.
What are you doing with Storm King?
Storm King, John and Sandy Carpenter's publishing enterprise. Like I said, when Leatherface came out, they wanted me to do the comic book based on Leatherface. And I said, okay. Because I thought I could do it. And I was a miserable failure at writing comic book scripts.
It has to be a different process.
It is screenplays won't even begin to do it for you if you go into the way comic scripts used to be written. And everybody who's a comic creator, Escobar has a different way of doing it. I mean, if you're the creator of your own comic, it boils down to whatever you wrote on the legal pad.
Okay.
Right? And so fortunately, a friend of mine, I got my name on the cover of the Leatherface comic book, but fortunately a friend of mine who was used to comics named Mort Castle, he took over Leatherface. And so I had tentatively something to do with the first issue, and then it's all Mort, and then there's my name on the cover of it, and I didn't have anything to do with it, except I wrote the source material.
Okay. Well.
Right. So it comes up that, hey, maybe you should write for Storm King. So it's got Dwayne over here. I don't know if you know who Dwayne Straczynski is, but he's a good friend of mine. He's a hard-boiled writer and is an extremely tall man.
Yeah.
And Tim Bradstreet, who is notorious in the comic book industry for his wonderful, covers for The Punisher and Hellblazer and all this stuff, much in demand. They had already hooked up with Sandy for the first issue in 2015 of what was called John Carpenter's Tales for a Halloween Night.
Okay.
Which turns out to be an annual anthology that we do. And I've been in every issue since the first issue.
Cool.
And they said, you should write a comic for Sandy. And I needed an excuse to reconnect with Sandy, who was an old friend. We had this terrific meeting and she goes, well, what story would you tell? And here I am on the couch again, spinning a story, right? Just like in the production office of the guy. And she goes, do it. And Dwayne was visiting from Philadelphia at that time. He was staying in my guest room in Hollywood. And I said, I'll show you what I think this should be. And you tell me if I shot myself in the foot or not. And one thing that I did was I really, I decided very quickly to write the comic script in final draft.
Okay.
And so the only thing I'm doing is I'm telling you what panels there are. And the thing that broke it for me was that I'm going, you're directing this. You're deciding what everybody sees, and the panel is a static shot.
Oh, okay.
And they can be different sizes, different. And I collaborate with my artists a lot. When we do a project, it's like, so we here I go, bam, bam, bam. I'm in Tales for Halloween Night every year.
Cool.
Sandy goes, well, we want you to do a series for us now. What do you got? Again, I'm on the couch, another one-liner,
Yeah.
And it's like, and so we did a 5-issue series called The Standoff about a UFO full of nasty aliens that crashes into a maximum security prison.
Oh, that'd be cool.
It was.
Yeah.
And you can get the graphic novel at the Storm King website. And so last year in the before times, before March 2020, we had just debuted Creepshow on Shudder.
Oh, cool.
And the first story that I did for Creepshow turned out to be one of the most popular shows. That was in October of.
So you wrote an episode, or you wrote?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, more than one.
I didn't realize they had that going again.
No, it debuted October 2019 on Shudder. It was based on a story I had also adapted for Sandy's comic book.
Very good.
Story
cool.
of mine.
Yeah.
And so we came back, and I had gone to Atlanta. I watched the filming. We're hanging out, and it's like we're getting ready, and it was a no-brainer. They're going to do a season 2, and I said, "What are we going to do for season 2?" And then the shutdown happened.
Yeah.
Right when they were supposed to start shooting it, and so that was delayed until about last September. They finally started having COVID protocols, and people started flying back to Atlanta.
Okay.
To shoot it, and they decided to do season 2 and 3 back to back, and they should be finished shooting season 3 in about 2 weeks. So there's a little bit of everything going on, but the thing I've been working on the closest is finishing off the comic series Hell.
Yep.
And getting the next book out. And so what we decided to do was a sampler of what we're doing at Cimarron Street. If you're unfamiliar, we have a thing coming out in about 4 weeks, that is a samples from all the different books we're doing for Cimarron Street.
Okay,
and
cool.
We're publishing it as a fake issue of a pulp magazine that never existed.
Oh, that'd be neat.
Called Weird Doom.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And you'll see that on Cimarron Street too.
Well, very good, David. I wanted to say thanks again for making time for us and coming on the show.
It's good to meet you, man.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share in your social media, where you can tag us at The Successful Screenwriter.